Yo, thank you for tuning in today. First, my last video got a whole bunch of slack. I got a lot of hate mail, and that's okay. I'm so okay with people responding me, telling me how I'm wrong, and sharing their opinion. But to defend myself and the way I have formed my opinions and beliefs about fitness is I coach people, and more often than not, people come to me trying to improve their performance in the gym or whatever modality they're training at. I give them the answers that will help them accomplish that goal. Those answers, I would argue, are not always the same as what's going to make them live a longer, healthier life. There is distinction there. I firmly believe that. Being a high-performing athlete and health and longevity, those are two separate things. And I do go to that rabbit hole, down that route, some of my athletes. All right, today, I wanted to talk about the Rogue Invitational. Specifically, there was another athlete that tore their Achilles, unfortunately. And in the last few events of this style at Rogue, 3 athletes have now torn their Achilles. My issue does not lie with the programming itself. The event was fine. We could very well have more of these. The issue lies in with the way athletes are training. I would argue majority of those athletes have not been conditioning their lower leg, loading the stretch reflex to that degree and intensity often enough. Simply put, most athletes do not perform plyometrics on a regular basis. And we have to go back in time. Several years ago, we decided to banish rebounding box jumps, which is a heavily loaded Achilles tendon movement. We did this for the sake of safety. We thought we would be more safe if we stopped rebounding box jumps, and now we're on the other side of it and we can look and examine. And I would go to argue that that was a poor choice, that us trying to make athletes safer made athletes not train plyometrics to the degree that we were at one point in time when athletes had to be ready for plyometrics. Point being is they weren't ready for it. I mean, just looking at the nature of the event at Rogue is they were jumping over logs, rolling under logs, jumping over logs, and it was like not even a 10-second bout. 3, 2, 1, go. For 10 seconds, they're sprinting at full speed. And then there was another 30, 40 seconds of work, not much. But the point that I am discussing is the 10 seconds maybe of an all-out sprint. I mean, how many of those athletes perform 10-second all-out sprints over under obstacles, stretching their ankle through its full range of motion, and then hitting the gas pedal to full speed? My guess would be none, but maybe some of them. I think a lot of them can do fine in that event and don't have anything going on just from a background in sports, which those dynamically cutting on a football field or basketball court replicates on the lower leg the forces that go through their Achilles and ankle the best rather than doing something like squats in a gym. So my call to action is that we need to unbanish rebounding box jumps to some degree. More importantly, high-level athletes that potentially could be going to an event like this or even a CrossFit competition need to be conditioning their lower leg to a much larger degree than what we currently are for the safety of their Achilles tendon. They need to be doing more plyometrics. So for those of you watching who don't know what even are plyometrics, the most basic form would just be a box jump. And then you can start adding more forces to that by doing something like a rebounding box jump or a death jump, which would be standing on top of a box. You drop down, take your ankle through a large range of motion, and since you're dropping down, it's a higher force, and then you jump. This process of plyometrics involves using the stretch reflex, which is a very good thing. This stretch reflex makes you stronger. This most basic test to prove that would be just doing a squat jump. Or not a squat jump, a vertical jump. If you go down like a normal squat jump, you descend and then you jump vertically. You will jump higher doing that rather than you killing the stretch reflex, squatting down, pausing, and then jumping. As you descend down, your muscle fibers elongate and they store energy, producing more force. It's a good thing, but it's something that we have to train. The most basic form of plyometrics that most people can do is just running. But you have to think about running compared to the examples I just said, like a depth jump, jumping off a box, loading your ankle versus running. The degree of forces are magnitudes different. So somebody who just goes for runs is not going to be, their tissue is not going to be conditioned to do sets of depth jumps into broad jumps or let alone sprint around on a basketball court because their ankles aren't conditioned to that. Their Achilles tendon is not conditioned to that style of movement, is not conditioned for that degree of forces to go through their ankle. So what happens when they do something that they're not conditioned to do at all at maximum intensity? Something breaks, something pops, and they tear their Achilles. I mean, I do think some of these athletes have been performing some plyometrics. I don't think all of them do it regularly. Me personally, I do it about half the year, I would say. which is not enough. But the main problem I have with it is even when I was doing it, in my head, I should say, when I am doing it, I still do it. I'm on a cycle with them right now. Is that even when I do it, I'm going through this motion of doing plyometrics, and I more so do it in terms of just priming myself for a lift. I don't really have a clear end goal. Point being, when I had a clear end goal for rebounding box jumps, I feel like I hit those movements with more intensity, which matters greatly. Because obviously, if you're not hitting your plyometric work at 100% full speed, you're not going to get the adaptations you want. Back in 2018, I was getting coached by Kevin Montoya. He was someone under Ben Bergeron for a long time, really knew what he was doing. And back in 2018, we were doing plyometric work almost regularly. We were rebounding, we were doing pogo jumps over a PVC pipe all the time. Rebounding box jumps got banished. And I would say the amount of programs I see programming plyometrics regularly dropped significantly over time, and now we're at an all-time low. And I'm creating this video to hopefully create awareness to coaches and athletes out there to be like, maybe I do need to do plyometrics so I can be more prepared to do box jumps or sprinting style events that my lower leg will be conditioned for the event at hand. Sorry, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's a big deal. I mean, even outside of just programming it for conditioning the tissue, there is a large reason of why we need to be doing this more. It is going to increase your rate of force development. Doing things like heavy back squats and heavy deadlifts will also help this if you're focusing on the right things. If you're doing speed development work, meaning much lighter loads than normal, but you're practicing fast bar speed or tempo, super slow, controlled, eccentric portions. This is going to help this cause. But the thing is doing all this heavy loading on your trunk, on your nervous system gets very taxing and it's hard to recover from. Doing something like plyometrics in terms of recovery is going to be much easier to recover from. So this is something you could add in very easily, even if you're not interested in potentially doing an event that could have demands like we saw at Rogue. It's just going to give you more tools to increase your force development quicker. It's going to give you more variety, and it's going to make you feel better because you're doing less axial loading. You're loading your trunk less. I mean, what it comes down to, kind of what I was saying, was increasing your rate of force development is large part a function of the stiffness of your tendons. When you do back squats or deadlifts, you can work on these things, specifically in your knees, in your hips. You can get those tendons more stiff. But again, that's your upper leg. That's not your lower leg. You're not conditioning your lower leg if you're doing that. Sure, you could be globally increasing your rate of force development, but you're not doing your lower leg service. Doing super heavy back squats isn't going to put more stiffness in your Achilles to be ready for the demands of this event. I mean, another thing I like to think about, watch a lot of sports, football, basketball, is that the increase in Achilles injuries, even in professional sports, is profound. In the last 5 years, compared to the previous 20, it's crazy how many more Achilles injuries have happened. I'm not a professional sports strength and conditioning coach, but I do have an opinion that very well could be wrong. And it comes from, I actually heard it was like a month ago. I heard John Gruden talking about the NFL. And he was very upset about what was going on in the NFL and how it's trending to this point where they're at now. And what that was is that these NFL teams, for sure, and NBA teams slightly different, but in the NFL, they are practicing less. They are doing full speed practices less, full contact less, and the amount of time they're able to practice is at its lowest point ever. And he was arguing some poor performance in the case of some blocking and contact, but point being, he said that and I was like, he's absolutely right. These athletes, professional athletes, at least in my head, the way I'm working through it, is they're practicing so much less for the sake of trying to make them more safe. So they don't have injuries in practice and then they can play football on the weekend in a game. But this, on a tissue level, might not be the best thing. Kind of CrossFit competitions banishing rebounding box jumps is that it's an effort to try and keep them more safe. But then when you look at it on the other side of the coin and we examine how that really worked, and the other things come into question. They practice less, so people might be more fresh to go play, but then during games, there might be more injuries rather than in practice, so it might offset and balance out. Point being is those athletes, since they're practicing less, they are accumulating less contractions at full speed. Their tissues aren't as prepared for the full speed contraction. So if someone was accumulating 300% more contractions through their lower leg, in this case, when they go out and play on Sunday, that massive increase is prone for some form of injury to happen. Not only Achilles, anything. Outside that, my second guess would be that just the sport, and this goes really for basketball too, and football, is that both the styles of game have increased speed. In football, we have had, it's been a while now, the spread offense. Spread out the field, speed kills, speed matters for everything in the spread offense. In basketball, pace is space with Steph Curry, and now being agile and fast in the NBA is more important than ever. And what happens with these two styles of play, plus the introduction of talent that is something like we've never seen before, when I say talent in just like raw speed and athleticism, is you get people expressing these crazy high speeds that both of the games have never seen before, is that I would say that partially is a function of more injuries. I guess the farther you are along the lines of being extremely, extremely fast, and the more you express that, in my head, the higher the likelihood of us seeing an event of someone getting injured. I don't know. I'm obviously not super educated in terms of professional sport injury analysis, but that's my take. If you want to roast me, go for it. And then as like at gym, when I'm at SUT CrossFit, when I'm just training the general population, something about them doing plyometrics is something I think about regularly. More so in this last year than ever. I mean, I said the benefits of doing plyometrics, conditioning your lower leg, being prepared for, I mean, that style event at Rogue, that was like they jumped over a log, ducked under a log. I mean, in nature, in terms of GPP, that's something very normal that we should train. And I think that's something the general population deserves to be trained for. And not only that is the same thing, another tool to help increase the rate of force development. But my problem is how exactly do I program this for the general population? It's hard. Zoe's mom, my fiance Zoe's mom, told me a story a while back, or she always like tells me these things. She listens to on podcasts and she just wants my opinion. And this one was interesting. She came to me one day, she goes, John, I heard that women above 50, the absolute best thing they can do is plyometric training. And I had to think about it for a little bit. And more or less, I was like, I mean, if you can do plyometric training, I would say that lady might be right who told you that. But this is the thing you have to think about. Like if I had a pyramid of strength training development over time, when you first start strength training, especially if you've been someone who's been sedentary for a decade, you just jumping right into plyometrics isn't very safe, because that pyramid, I would put plyometrics almost at the very top. Those forces that go through all your tendons are extremely high. You're probably better off to do something that you can control a little bit better, meaning just lighter back squats with a tempo, deadlifts with a tempo. You can just control it better. You can put the amount of force on the tissue for something that you're going to be able to recover from. Doing plyometrics, you have to remember the most basic form is running. At my gym, we'll say I have a number of people that simply running doesn't work very well for them, whether it's their knee, their hip. So if they're unable to do the most basic form of plyometrics, how am I going to perform with them plyometrics in a class? And this is a problem I haven't thought, like I don't know the answer to, and I'm just expressing my thoughts to you. And I think most CrossFit gyms have maybe not very big demographic. They have some people who running is difficult for them. It's harder for them to recover from. Things ache for a prolonged period of time. So I'm in a conundrum of how do I program plyometrics for the general population in a class setting? And that's an answer that I think is hard, especially my demographic, I would say, is for a CrossFit gym in older range. As you get older, you probably lose that ability. And that's another reason. Why should the general population be training plyometrics? If we have a capacity in terms of health and longevity, we want to hold on to that as best we can and as long as we can. So a 25-year-old doing plyometrics is easy, but a 45-year-old who hasn't put any degree of force on their Achilles or patella tendon in a decade, it's going to take them time to get to the point doing plyometrics. I think some gyms have a demographic that they can easily program depth jumps, broad jumps, box jumps. But if I'm trying to serve everyone and I'm trying to serve the athletes that can't do it, in my head, I'm not going to do squats with them. Even if they're doing, let's just say they're working on their neuromuscular relationship with their lower leg, they're doing some form of tibialis raise, maybe some patella focus work, or they're to the point they could do small jumps. But the forces are so low, and you have to remember, like this is in a class setting. They're going to be watching other people. Maybe I'm having them do bounding drills, box jumps, whatever it may be. I'm going to be telling them to jump on a 45-pound plate or do tibialis raises while they're watching other people do these much harder exercises. What I'm getting at is getting that athlete to buy into what I'm doing takes a decent length conversation. It's absolutely possible, and I've done it in different settings, but I just don't think myself and other coaches in the space are programming plyometric work for the general population enough. Or at least maybe I'm missing something that a lot of people are doing and they've cracked the code. I don't know. But I don't know the answer to it. I just thought I would go for a rant about it. Well, I guess point being, if you're an elite level CrossFitter, not even, if you're a CrossFitter that wants to go do competitions, the style of event at Rogue is very fair. We could easily see it again. You could see it at a local competition, is to be prepared for it. You're going to be prepared for that event by conditioning your lower leg to the forces that are going to match that equally. Do more plyometrics. If you like this video, I would love it if you sent to someone, and please subscribe, follow me on Spotify, leave a comment. I would love to know your thoughts. Till next time, peace.